welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 54, where we are talking about a game about smugglers and bounty hunters on the fringes of the galaxy, Star Wars Outer Rim. But before we get to that, we are going to start this episode like we always do with the news. And as always, our news comes to us from tablefor1.me. So if you haven't checked out that website, please do. It's a great location to go and learn more about solo games news and look at reviews. So check that out at tablefor1.me. Our first bit of news this week is that Ginkopolis from Pearl Games, which came out in 2012, is getting a second print run. Not a second edition, because it's too soon for that.
Right.
You've not played this game before, right?
Nope. I'm not even sure I've played any of their games.
So I have not played this game either, but as I understand it, it's from the designers of Twa and Black Angel, which are, big, massive Euro hits.
Right.
This is a city building game that does have a built-in solo mode and is surprisingly popular. Like, people are still several years later clamoring for a reprint of this game. My understanding is that it went out of print not long after it came out, and it's been out of print and difficult to get for years. Sometimes people will pop up online saying they paid $200 or $300 for a copy and they've gotten their Grail game, which is mind-blowing.
Right.
But it's coming back. So if you're interested in a sci-fi city building game, all we know is that this is coming out sometime this year. And I don't believe it's going to have any major changes. The same city building, drafting, engine building kind of stuff.
Same art and everything? Same
art and everything is what it looks like. If we learn more, we'll mention it again here on this show. But thought a lot of you would be excited to hear that Ginkopolis from Pearl Games is getting a reprint this year. Our second bit of news is that Lucky Duck Games is kickstarting Chronicles of Crime, the Millennium series. So this is interesting because I've still not played Chronicles of Crime, which was a big hit that came out in 2018, I think. And it did a really good job of letting you solve cases and do like the kind of deduction thing, but also using a phone and letting you look around a room. You could even buy these VR glasses that let you move around your head and kind of look at the room. It always sounded amazing to me. I love these kind of deduction games. Mm-hmm. But this is interesting because each of these games in this trilogy is standalone, but they do have some kind of connective tissue. You're basically following or solving cases related to the bloodline of the Lavelle family in the years 1400, 1900, and 2400. I just think that's super cool.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea for a game.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great idea. The artwork looks really cool and compelling, very moody, 3 very different atmospheres, which is cool. I like all of that. I think that seems great. And each entry, I think, is around like $30 or so.
Okay. Yeah, it's not bad.
No, it's not really bad. I think it's a consumable experience, but they also do have a community editor where people can design their own cases. And people have done that for a while, and they're continuing to support that. It just seems really neat. At some point, I want to review this on the show. But until we do, you should definitely go and check out Chronicles of Crime Millennium series from Lucky Duck Games, and that is on Kickstarter right now. Our last bit of news for this week is that Cloudspire from Chip Theory Games is getting a reprint of the base game and 2 new factions. And that's something that a lot of people are going to be interested in. If you don't know about Cloudspire, it's basically a MOBA style game where you are moving huge stacks of amazing chips across neoprene mats to go and conquer another race's fortress. And as far as solo play is concerned, they have a book of solo scenarios that you set up that are basically like puzzles.
Okay.
That you need to be able to use each faction's strengths in order to solve, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a neat way to approach that. It's been a big hit with a lot of solo gamers. I think that Rolling Solo named this their top strategy game of last year. So it looks neat. I haven't played it because it's crazy expensive. It's like $120, $130 for the base game. If you were interested in getting a copy of the base game and wanted to explore some of these expansions, you can do that. That's coming up on Kickstarter on April 14th, so check that out soon. Okay, that's all the news we've got for this week. So before we get to the review, we just want to remind you that this show is sponsored by Stone Valley Games. You can visit them online at stonevalleygames.com, and they're just outstanding. We've talked about them on this show several times at this point, but I just got in another pre-order from them this week. The sweet, sweet Thor pack for Marvel Champions. And when they sent over that copy that I had pre-ordered, they also included a couple of really cool games for us to review free of charge that you all have been asking for. So because of them, we are going to be reviewing Maracaibo and Brass Birmingham. And I'm told that there is a copy of Vinos on the way as well. So very, very excited about all three of those games. I've been excited about Vinos for a long time. Yeah. So we will be covering those, and that's all made possible because of them. So if you get a chance, if you want to find a way to support this show, one way you can do that is by considering buying one of your games from Stone Valley the next time you go to purchase something. They carry a lot of solo-friendly games. Everything is packed super well. They're very friendly, very efficient. Give them a shot sometime. StoneValleyGames.com. Eric and Wendy, who run that shop, are wonderful folks, and they will take care of you. All right, let's get into the review. And the review copy for this episode was also given to us by Stone Valley Games, and that is Star Wars Outer Rim. This is designed by Corey Konezga and Tony Fanchi, and comes to us from Fantasy Flight Games. It was released in 2019 and plays 1 to 4 players. In Star Wars Outer Rim, you're going to take on the role of a smuggler or a bounty hunter setting out to make your mark on the galaxy. You'll travel the Outer Rim in your personal ship, hire crew, complete jobs, claim bounties, and try to become the most famous or infamous outlaw in the galaxy. And we're going to start this review like we always do by talking about the components for this game. And Carter, what do you think about the components for Outer Rim?
Basically what you would expect from every other Fantasy Flight game. I mean, just solid art, solid card stock, board qualities, component qualities. I don't know what to say. Not an extensive description, but if you've played a Fantasy Flight game, this is going to be the exact same type of thing. High quality things, an interesting shaped board that's different, a curve.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it really beyond that. I mean, Fantasy Flight components are nothing if not steady, right?
Yeah.
The cards are always good quality, linen finish cards, nice thick boards, and anything cardboard in this game is going to have a really nice, satisfying thickness. And one thing I'll say about this game, there aren't too many tokens and components, I guess. Like, I expected there just to be a boatload of tokens for us to deal with, but it really didn't feel overwhelming to me.
Yeah, tokens aren't bad. You do have a lot of decks of cards out.
Yeah, you do. You're going to have 6 main decks of cards, and each one's got a decent number of cards in it.
Oh, more than that. You have to have all the encounter cards for the planets.
Right. Yeah, just the 6 is just for the market deck. Yeah, there's also the encounter cards and the AI deck when you play solo. Yeah, there are a lot of cards in this game.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's like, I don't know how it works. I mean, the board is pretty small, so you can put a lot of the decks kind of on the internal curve of the board. But yeah, there's a lot of decks.
Yeah, now one thing I will say about the board is I was kind of skeptical of it at first. I wasn't really sure about it. I thought the shape was weird. It didn't look very functional or very interesting. But actually, I kind of like it now that I've played with it. The one thing I really like about it is that because you do have to set out so many stacks of cards, the shape of the board is such that you can set the decks inside of this half circle that is the board, and you can save some table space that way, which is really nice. So once they realized they didn't need a full board, this was, I think, a good option for them. So I really like that. Also, one other thing I would say is the player boards are pretty sweet.
Yeah, the player boards are worth mentioning. They're the nice kind of double layered, so all of your pieces kind of fit inside of it. They're good boards. Yeah. Satisfying to use.
Yeah, they have these little holes at the top for tracking your fame that you move a peg down, which I think they first used in the Fallout, the board game, and I thought was pretty cool there, but was surprised it hadn't been implemented anywhere else. It's really cool and satisfying. I like that. I also like the reputation trackers. There are these 3 trenches on your player board that you slide little cardboard pieces up and down to track your reputation. It's a silly thing, but I don't know. I just like it.
It's nice. It's that nice tactile satisfaction.
Yeah, and it does have dice in the game, and the dice are really nice. They're these like cool pearlescent gold colored D10s.
I think they're just D8s.
D8s, yeah. And they look great.
Yeah.
And they're not D6s.
Right. It's just so nice to get something other than a D6.
Yeah, I really like that a lot. The only downside I would say about the components is that when you are setting out your components for your player space, you do have a ship mat and these recessed player boards that have to go side by side. And it does take up a lot of space.
Or just a wide space in front of you.
Right. Yeah, that's maybe a good way to say it. It's much bigger than I anticipated. And you do have to set up one for you and one for the AI player.
Right.
So there is that. But otherwise, really solid components. And also the same thing is true, I think, for the rules.
Yeah. Very standard approach for Fantasy Flight. You have the how to play book that kind of walks you through the main beats of going through a turn. And then it has their kind of index reference rules where if you have more questions or kind of like outlier exceptions, you just look it up and try to figure it out that way.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of that whole system. I think that it works really well and it's a good way to ease you into the game, but it still makes room for all those kind of edge cases and everything. Really excellent. And the core rules for this, the Learn to Play guide, is not bad at all in terms of length or overhead. Not bad at all.
No, yeah.
So really thought all of that was great. And what surprised me is that the rules, they're not very long, but the game's pretty robust. It gives you a lot of space to play in for as few rules as there are.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward what your actions are. A lot of it will come down to just, okay, well, how are you going to spend your turn? What are you going to try to pursue? What are you going to prioritize? And so, yeah, that gives you a lot of options.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying, I was under the impression that this was a pick up and deliver game when I first heard about it, but it's really not. It's a sandbox game. And that means that there is a pick up and deliver element to it, like there is for a lot of these kind of games. But you don't have to just like pick up pieces of cargo and carry them somewhere else, right? That's not what this is. That would be profoundly uninteresting. I generally don't love pick up and deliver stuff.
Right.
So I was delighted to see that there's a lot of different things you can do to get the 10 fame that you need to win the game. And it's all broken down into 3 pretty simple phases: planning, action, and encounter. And we're not going to talk about these in too much depth, but I think it's worth mentioning what you do just to give you a sense of like the flow of the turn. When you're in the planning phase, basically all you're going to decide to do is either move, get money, or heal your character and ship. And probably my favorite twist on this kind of genre, at least compared to the other games that I've played, is that this has a set movement value for your character. Like I played games like Zaya or Merchants of Venus, which is really more of a pick up and deliver game than a sandbox. And they still, for some reason, have roll to move.
Yeah, it's weird. It's one of those things we talked about before we started, and I'd kind of forgotten that. It can feel really anticlimactic when you get a super bad roll. You just can't get as far as you want or need to.
Yeah, it feels really bad. And even those games that will say like roll a die and see what that value is and then add your base movement to that.
Mm-hmm.
That still really stinks, especially if you're playing against somebody else, because not only do you have to go through the work of rolling the die, which is not interesting for what you're trying to do, but also if somebody else rolls better than you on their movement is everything in a game like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the game is all about trying to move efficiently from one place to the next to cover more ground and do more stuff. You can really fall behind just based on that roll to move aspect.
Right. I'll say that's one thing I do like about it also is instead of having the rolling a die to move or whatever, you have these patrol ships that are affecting, the different routes you can take. And like, that's more of what you're dealing with. That's the more unexpected thing, but you can still see it coming, try to like plan around it and things like that. It doesn't feel quite as capricious and it's a little bit more interesting as like a problem to solve. Getting a low roll on movement, that's not a problem to solve. It's just like, well, I don't move as far.
Right, yeah, exactly. And that's deeply unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's unsatisfying about these kind of games for me typically is that often it's good for you to stay put, right? Or like stay on a planet. Interact with kind of the main spaces on the board, right? Because often these games have several points of interest. In this case, it's planets where you can buy goods or other market cards or interact with contacts. And then there's empty space in between that just has to be traveled as part of the game. When you're spending the end of your turn on one of those empty spaces, usually that's very unsatisfying because there's nothing for you to do. It's like your whole turn was just movement. Here, what I really like is that they recognize that, okay, you may want to stay on a planet for longer. If you do, that's great. You give up your move, but you get 2,000 money.
Yeah, which isn't a ludicrous amount, but it is a meaningful amount.
Yeah, if it's not just a pittance. If it was just a nothing amount, that would not be okay, but some of the most expensive items in the game are like 25,000. So, 2,000 is not going to buy one of those items, but that's a substantial jump forward.
Right.
So I like that.
It's a substantial jump forward, and because there are a lot of items that are in the like 5,000 to 6,000 range.
Yeah.
And so 2,000 towards that isn't bad, especially when you consider a lot of the cargo rewards are going to be from 5 to 7,000, 8,000. So if you think of it in terms of like that, and that's going to take you a couple of turns to complete typically. So it's a meaningful amount. I would say.
Yeah, while still not being enough for you to want to sit still every single turn. I think that was really smart. And then also the ease with which you can remove damage from yourself or your ship is really great. They don't add a ton of rules for how you calculate how many wounds you heal or how much hull you heal. It's just if you don't move, you heal all of it.
Yeah, if you don't move and or take the money. But yeah, it's a choice.
Yes, it's a choice and a good one, I think. So I really think that's great. And then after you've made that choice of whether you want to get money, take a move, or clear this damage, then that's where the meat of the game comes in. You have the decision then after you've moved to trade with another player if you're on the same spot. And that's not really something that's going to come into play in a solo game, but it's there for multiplayer. If you're on a planet, you can get a card from a market deck. And this is a big one. There are these 6 decks of cards that are out on the table, and the top card of each deck is flipped up, and there's a ship deck, a bounty deck, cargo, luxury, job, or gears and mod. Those all do pretty much what you would think they do. I mean, you start out with kind of not a clunker ship, but a pretty basic ship. You can buy a nice big one with more space for crew, more space for cargo, better guns. That's pretty satisfying and cool. You can pick up cargo so that you can carry it to another planet, drop it off for a reward, or if it's illegal cargo, you can maybe get fame from it as well. Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you pick up illegal cargo, the rewards for it are definitely higher, but there's a chance that you won't be able to deliver it. That's a cool twist on this, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also like luxury goods, which really expensive, obviously, but there's a good chance that you're going to get some fame from them as well. Jobs. The job cards are funny to me because they're like, go hit a casino. That's one of the things that I appreciate about this game is because I thought this was maybe straight pick up and deliver, I was pleasantly surprised that thematically, there is the carry one good to another space thing, but then there's also like go to this space, try to roll this amount of successes to see if you knock over a casino.
Right. Or try to do the Kessel Run.
Yeah, which is really neat. I like that it's all a mix of things that you've seen in the movies or heard of in the movies, and then like some other kind of just things that they made up. I thought that was really great. And then, you can pick up bounties or you can get equipment that makes your character or your ship better. And all of that works together really well. You have the option of, if you're on a planet, you can buy one of these cards. And then one of the other kind of small rules that they add here, but that I think is helpful is before you buy one of these cards, you can discard the top card of any one deck, which seems like a small thing, but it's really nice.
Yeah, it really is because it helps keep the different decks fresh. I mean, if you were playing multiplayer, you could presumably, try to anticipate what other players would want, and you could try to cycle that out of their reach. Or if it's just like something, you want to get, and it's not what you like. You want a different like cargo or a different piece of gear. I don't know. It's all nice.
Yeah, I found myself doing it every turn, partly because like some of the cards on the top of the deck, like you said, I'm just like, that's not really a good fit for what I'm trying to do. But also because there are some cards on the top of the deck that I could see were going to benefit the AI more than they would for me if they were able to get that in their possession. I thought it was nice that like you don't know what's coming up after that, so it could be just as bad for you or worse, but you have that choice available to you, and it keeps things just feeling fresh. It's hard to keep markets feeling fresh in solo games, I think.
Especially with 6 decks.
Right, exactly. And I think this does a good job of that. So yeah, you've got the option to get one of these, and that's a major part of the game, picking these cards, because that's where your growth as a character and as a ship comes from, often is just from buying these cards. If you're on a planet where you can deliver goods that you picked up, you can do that. And then also you have action abilities that are printed on some of the crew cards or on your character card. You can take an action that way. And then finally, you have the encounter step. And this is one of my favorite parts of the game, is that you have so many options for how you encounter. It's not just like pull a card and see what you see. On each of the planets on the board, you have these face down contact tokens. You'll get bounty cards from the market deck that will tell you, I need you to find, Greedo. And Greedo is a green contact token. And you can see on the board, okay, there's like maybe 4 or 5 of these green contact tokens spread throughout the outer rim. I need to go and try to look at them, but they're face down. And there are many other useful things that you could do during this encounter step. But if you want, you can try to peek at one of these tokens and see what happens. And what's really cool is that you're not just peeking at the token, but they have you draw a card from this numbered deck that's static. You don't shuffle it or anything and look at what it says. That's you interacting with that character. And sometimes the character wants to give you a job. Other times they are willing to join your crew and they'll give you more skills so that you can pull off bigger and better jobs as the course of the game goes on, or give you more cool actions that you can do. And so all of that I thought was really neat.
Yeah, it's a neat thing because you don't know exactly what the contacts are going to do. You can, use, like you said, use them for crew. If your crew slots are full, you can trade them out. And so contacts will kind of drift around this outer rim area. Or, you know, if it's a crew member and it's like someone you have a bounty for, it's like, well, guess what? I'm not going to worry about drawing that card because I'm going to try to capture them and deliver them or just eliminate them.
Right, which I think is pretty neat. Or there sometimes you can have them join your crew and then later you find out there's a bounty available for them and then you can fight them after they're already on your crew.
I know.
Which is pretty funny.
So dirty.
I love that. In that way, it does a good job of capturing kind of that grittiness of the Outer Rim scum and villainy of the Star Wars universe, I guess. That's a pretty cool thematic touch, I think. So yeah, that like looking for these contacts, another neat thing about it is that when you go and look for a card from this deck, there are sometimes multiple copies of the same numbered card that it tells you to retrieve. And so you basically end up having this mechanic that's similar to other games that Fantasy Flight's done, like Eldritch Horror or Mansions of Madness, where you'll have multiple condition cards or spell cards that are the same on the front, but you flip around on the back, there's something different. You could have different experiences with the same numbered card, which is pretty cool. It increases the replayability of this game pretty dramatically. And also, I was pleasantly surprised by some of the people that you'll find in these contacts. The core people from main Star Wars movies, but then there's also like characters from Rogue One, which is nice, and even some of the extended universe stuff like Admiral Thrawn is in here, who's a pretty famous character. Right. So if you're a Star Wars fan, it's definitely that the fan service extends beyond the core films.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so really nice. Other things that you can do when you're trying to encounter is you can draw a location card for wherever you are, similar to like Eldritch Horror again.
Right. And similar in the sense that like on Eldritch Horror, the board, it says like, oh, this is good for gaining spells or whatever. Same type thing. On the card, it tells you this planet is good for getting gear or money, or this one's good for jobs. It's a nice little hint of like, okay, well, I can kind of anticipate if it's worth doing this encounter or whatever, but you still don't know exactly what's going to come through it.
Yeah, the fact that it does both is nice because you can plan. It makes it a meaningful choice to decide to pull one of those cards instead of the other good things you could do with your encounter step. But they still got the drama of not knowing exactly what's going to be there. I really like that. And I also really appreciate that even when you're not on a planet, even if you're in just like dead space, there's still an encounter deck for those in between spaces. And I kind of like that. When you drew those cards in Eldritch Horror, they were generally, you know, pretty oppressive.
Yes.
Like everything in those games. But they fit the theme of this a little better. Like, they're not going to punish you for pulling these cards. It's just, it's a cool, fun thing for you to interact with and more opportunities for theme and flavor. I thought all of that was really great. The last thing that you can do in these encounter steps, which I think is fun, is that whenever you're buying a card from the market deck, one of these 4 patrol ships that are associated with either the Rebel or the Empire or the Hutts that are moving around the board, you know, they're going to come closer to you. If you want, you can encounter them by trying to fight them. And the more you fight them and defeat them, the stronger they're going to get as the game goes by. So, you know, they kind of power up with you. But there's an opportunity for you to get fame there from destroying ships, you know, as some smuggler or bounty hunter. It just is another opportunity for theme and flair.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really the meat of the core game. You're going to be going to different planets, trying to pick up jobs and bounties, and then trying to fulfill those bounties by flying around the galaxy, getting better stats for your ship or your character, getting more crew so that you can complete better jobs. And the goal of the game is to be the first player to get 10 fame. I guess one other thing we should mention here, as I forgot to mention it earlier, is combat. Often these kind of jobs are going to bring you into conflict, not with other players if you're playing multiplayer. This game has very little player interaction. But you'll sometimes need to fight a bounty, a potential bounty, or you'll need to fight one of these patrol ships. And the way combat is handled in this game is you're going to just look at your ship combat or your ground combat, depending on what situation you're in. You're going to roll the number of dice equal to that stat for you and for the defender. And you look at who got more hits. Whoever got more hits wins. That doesn't always mean that somebody dies in combat, which is interesting. You don't fight to the death or anything like that. Although if you do die in this game, it's not a big deal. You just spawn back the next turn.
Yeah, it basically just means you don't get to move.
Yeah, and you don't get money. Your choice has to be clear all your damage.
Right.
But yeah, it's not an exciting combat system.
No, it's simple. Roll who gets the most hits, you win, you take damage. Yeah, not a lot to it.
In some ways that's nice because there's not like a lot of rules associated with combat or anything like that. It's definitely very streamlined. And one other thing I like is that on the dice there are blank sides, which are misses. There are hits, and then there are symbols that can be converted into hits, basically, if you have the right crew or other mods. So I do think it's nice that you have the opportunity to kind of level that piece of it up, but it's just not an exciting combat experience. So I just mentioned that to say that if you don't like luck-based combat, that's all this is. There's a decision to be made based on, like, I can see they're going to roll 5 dice, and I'm only going to roll 3. Do I want to take the risk of trying to take this combat on? And you might be successful, but you probably won't be. And so to me, it just isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
But that is a key piece of the game. Otherwise, that's what the whole game is. You're going to keep doing this until somebody hits 10 fame, and then that person wins the game. Now, if you're playing this solo, there is a built-in solo mode, which is pretty cool, and something that Fantasy Flight Games seems to be getting better at. One thing I was really impressed with is that it has like a full Automa deck.
Yeah, they printed their own deck. I would say well thought out in how they handle it. And I don't love having to manage a completely set up player and still managing their money, what like cards they have, all this stuff. That's not great to me. But still, I'm not making choices. I read the card. There's like some small learning as far as like how it handles certain things based on what the cards are telling you to do. But I mean, it's really simple and straightforward. And once you get the hang of it, you don't think about it.
Yeah, they do a couple of things that I think are really smart. I mean, one is just the flip a card and resolve way of managing an AI is really clever. It's streamlined and really easy to handle. Each card has 3 parts, and basically it'll say, do the first one of these that you can do. The second section will say, do all of these that apply. I think that's really great. It does a good job of telling you where this character is going to move, what they're going to buy, if they can buy anything. And it's kind of like baby's first flowchart, essentially. I mean, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just found it very easy to navigate.
Yeah.
The major difference between this and like an Automa Factory Automa system is that it does collect resources and it does collect cards. And generally, one of the markers of an Automa is that it doesn't do those things. It streamlines the experience of managing another character, and they are compensated in some other way. This does not do that, and that makes it fiddly.
Yes.
Because you're going to spend a lot of time not trying to figure out what to do, but you are going to spend a significant amount of time like collecting money from these things and like trying to get tokens and things in place where they need to be, and like sifting through the money, like how much do they have again? It's not a big deal, but it's just like I don't really want to manage cards and a whole separate board and other stuff for the Automa. Feels like kind of a miss to me.
Yeah, I feel like there could have been a way to streamline that where you don't have to manage their resources and cards, and it still would have not broken other parts of the game, but it's not the worst thing ever, but I feel like, yeah, kind of a missed opportunity, like you said.
Yeah, especially because, like you mentioned earlier, this is not a game that has a lot of interaction. So really the function of the Automa is have somebody to compete against for points. Because it's not really in your way movement-wise most of the time. It's not going to do things that change the board state dramatically. You're not interacting with it. I mean, there are a few instances where you might, right? There are some cards that would say maybe one of your bounties is on their ship or something like that. But it's not going to come up that often. And it just feels like this whole thing doesn't really need to be here. I would maybe be more interested in a solo version of this game that is like try to get 10 points within so much time, like so many rounds, or maybe a score chart that tells me how well I did based on how many rounds it took me to get to 10 points, something like that. I don't know. A lot of people won't find that satisfying. And again, this is not a convoluted AI or anything like that. It feels nicely competitive to me. I felt like I was jockeying for points, you know, and had to work to keep up with this thing, but not rush so much that I wasn't exploring. But I don't know. There was something missing.
Yeah, I agree. The interaction is just low enough that I feel like some of that stuff could have been just handled differently because, like you said, the interaction is low enough that it's not super important. I feel like the main purpose is to help move patrol ships around and help cycle the market and just give like somewhat of a timer.
Yeah, and it does do those things, and it does them relatively easily. It's a small thing. It feels like it didn't all have to be there for that. So otherwise, though, the solo experience is satisfying. My games took me about an hour and a half, a little longer than what I would usually sit down to play. But I wasn't bored during the game or anything like that. There was still plenty to do.
Yeah.
So, overall, I thought it felt pretty good. And as far as the replayability for this game goes, I mean, it's pretty high. There's a lot of cards in the market deck. There are multiple versions of some of your starter cards that you get. Each character feels pretty different because they have their own personal goal that they're trying to complete. And when you complete it, you flip over your character card to kind of their better, more mature side or whatever.
Right. Your ships also have goals that you can use that helps you, know, get special abilities.
I mean, I think all of that is really clever and means that because there are several characters in the base game and the market decks are pretty stacked, I think there's a good amount of replayability just in the base box. Now, that being said, I can see how the market decks after, let's say, 6 or 7 games would start to feel a little stale and repetitive, probably. And you're going to start to feel like you've seen a lot of this before. And, that's not the end of the world. It's still going to come out differently each time. It's still going to have a different experience. But I think this game could benefit from an expansion.
Yeah, the kind of expansion that's just giving more content, helping add to the variability, things like that.
Right. The kind of expansion that includes like Baby Yoda type character, also like a Mandalorian. Give us some Mandalorian expansion. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
This is the perfect game for that.
So would Baby Yoda be a contact or an illegal good?
Yes.
Okay.
It would be both somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that would be really cool. And a lot of people, I'm not the only person who thinks that. There are a lot of people online who've said that kind of thing. So I don't know. I think that would be a great addition. But otherwise, there's a lot in the base box. It's not like you're getting bad value for money or anything like that. It's really good stuff here. And if you want increased replayability, or if you find the AI player is too easy, there is a user on Board Game Geek who has created a variant. It's a spreadsheet in the files section of the Outer Rim page that shows how you could tweak the AI deck for each character that you would play against to make them behave a little bit more like the character they are and to increase the challenge, which I think is a very cool idea. I mean, practically it means, I guess, mocking up some new cards or something. I'm not sure exactly like functionally how that would work, but I thought it was a neat idea. I'll try to link to that in the show notes for anybody who's interested. But yeah, lots of good stuff in the base game. And I think that covers pretty much the meat of this game. So we're going to move into the end of our review where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game before we decide whether it gets the stomp. For me, I mean, there's a lot of good in this game. The components are excellent. The fact that this is kind of a sandbox experience, to me, that's great. I was really thinking it was going to have a narrower focus than that, and I'm glad that it doesn't.
Yeah, I think if it was just pick up and delivery, I would be bored, but it's good that it's got the variety. You feel like you have choices. Well, I mean, it's not even choices. I think you naturally will strike a balance between kind of what you're doing and what you prioritize in the moment, and you're just kind of responding to the board state, and that feels good.
Yeah, and yet it's not so open that you're just like, I can do anything. The fact that your characters have certain abilities and items that make them asymmetrical from the start gives you some indication where you should focus your attention. You don't have to, but to me, it's helpful to have some boundaries on what would be good for me. That's really nice. I think all that works together really well. There's low rules overhead here. And increasingly, that's a big deal to me. Low rules overhead and good player aids.
Yeah, the rules are designed in a way that they can be simplified for just a card-sized player aid. It's just one of those things that, like, yeah, I just almost every turn, I would just check in and be like, all right, these are the things I'm going to do. And it just helps just keeping your own pace, remembering the things.
It's definitely one of Fantasy Flight's more user-friendly experiences, I think. Like, even the inclusion of these goal tokens just for solo play, where you put one on a planet that marks where the AI is trying to go to deliver cargo or whatever. It means that I'm not flipping back through the rulebook. I'm not referencing lots of other printed materials. Pretty much everything I need is on the board or on these player aid cards, which is really nice. And one other thing I'll mention here as far as rules go, I just really love the idea of the set movement or money or healing. It's just such a great addition. And maybe one last thing I would say here is I think the solo mode that's included here is solid. I appreciate that they included it in the box and that they gave it its own AI deck, and it feels like it got attention and development, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that.
So yeah, most of this game is good. I do have a few things that I would consider bad. No ugly things, but just bad. For me, luck is one of those. Especially the combat system is just, it's fine, it's serviceable, but it's pretty forgettable. It doesn't get in the way, but it just doesn't add anything really.
Yeah, you expect there to be combat, and so they give something that will prop that up enough to be present. But yeah, it's not a combat game. There's nothing tactical. There's nothing really advanced about it.
I would also say that like this game has a decent sized table footprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's not insane, but especially the player boards, that's really my main complaint. The way the AI system works in terms of having the player boards set up, having to manage tokens for them and all that increases the table footprint and also the fiddliness of the game.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's one of those things that a lot of times I'll play solo games in a rolling desk chair, just having to roll back and forth between like my area and the AI area.
Oh, that's clever. That works pretty well, I bet.
Yeah.
You'd have to roam pretty far for this one.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to take up a wide swath of table space. The last thing that I would say here is that I just was never really enthralled at any point. The game is good. The mechanics are thematic, right? And they have Star Wars flair, but there's not a set narrative for this game. You're getting little chunks of story, and the narrative that emerges, it's definitely Star Wars. It didn't suck me in the way that I wanted or create like these great narratives that I would tell people about or think about again after the fact, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the theme worked a little bit better for me. But I do agree with, I didn't necessarily feel like a narrative emerge for myself or my playthrough. But I also agree with just nothing about it really like was like gripping, makes me just like super excited about the game. It's just a well done game. And if any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, you'll probably like it.
I think that's where I'm going to end up as far as the Stomp is concerned too. Like to me, this is not a Stomp game because I do think it's very good. I think it's well designed. I really, again, appreciate the attention to the solo game. I appreciate the fan service, frankly. Like, I am a fan of Star Wars. Service me.
Right.
That's what I want. I like the fact that you throw in Thrawn and, Jyn Erso and some of these other characters that aren't core Chewbacca, Han Solo characters. I like, but I just like it. I don't love it. But for a lot of people, you should know, a lot of people seem to really, really love this solo. So don't hear me say, this game is good and think, I don't think I would fall in love with this. Like you might. The guy who heads up the solo board gamers group, Martin Gonzalez, he is famous for promoting games that he loves and getting people to buy them. And so there's a hashtag, BlameMartinG, that has become famous on this group. He loves Star Wars Outer Rim. I think he even designed a 3D printed insert for it. Like really went all out. And the thing is, like his enthusiasm for the game is part of what got me interested in it. That and I love Star Wars. After playing it, I absolutely see why he loves it. And I can see why other people really love it. So all that to say, you might love this game. I just like it.
Yeah.
So this is not a game that's going to get the stomp of approval from us, but it is a good game. And it's one that if you like Star Wars, you should definitely check out. Maybe play before you buy, but there's some really good stuff here. And hopefully they give us that Mandalorian expansion that this game definitely deserves. But until then, it's a great game. Check it out. And when you do, check it out from Stone Valley Games. All right, that's all we've got for this episode, folks. If you have not yet checked out the Dice Tower Network, you can check that out at dicetower.com. You can find other podcasts like ours that might be a good fit for you. Also, if you haven't followed us on Facebook or Instagram yet, you can do that. And you can follow us on Instagram at Solosaurus Podcast, where you can see mediocre pictures of the games that I've been playing recently. If you haven't yet rated or reviewed us on iTunes, please do that. It helps us to spread the word about the show. Also, you can share about the show on social media without, spamming people. It's been a good way for more people to find out about this over the last year or so. Finally, on Board Game Geek, we have a micro badge, and you can get this beautiful little yellow and purple dinosaur for your own profile for 8 Geek Gold. And if you don't have 8 Geek Gold, you can send me a little message, and I will be more than happy to spot you what you need to get that for yourself. One last thing, and thing that we haven't mentioned in a while, is that we do have an email address. You can email us with any comments or questions you have at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com, and we will be happy to respond to you. All right, folks, that's all we've got for this episode. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.